The sprawling estate loomed ahead, a glittering fortress nestled in a forest of oak and pine, where the sounds of the wild were drowned out by the whir of drones buzzing overhead. Leah adjusted her sunglasses, surveying the manicured lawns and pristine fountains that danced with shimmering lights, all under a golden sun that seemed to mock the imminent chaos. She had arrived expecting a weekend of luxury, not realizing that she was stepping into a twisted game where she'd be the prey. "Welcome to the ultimate survival experience," a voice boomed from the towering balcony. It was Brad, the overzealous host, who had the kind of smile that could sell ice to an Eskimo. He gestured grandly, arms wide as if he were about to reveal a hidden treasure. "Tonight, we dine and mingle, and tomorrow, well, you'll have a chance to escape." "Escape?" Leah mumbled, tilting her head in confusion. She shot a glance at the other guests, who were just as bewildered. A few chuckled nervously, a sign of the growing tension. Brad chuckled, clearly enjoying the rising discomfort. "You're all here to participate in the most exclusive event of the year. The hunt. You'll be the stars, and we'll see just how well you can run from our elite team of hunters." A light bulb flickered in Leah's head, illuminating the absurdity of the situation. "Wait, so we're like, dear? Are we expected to run and hide while you all play dress-up as hunters? Do I get a stylish orange vest at least?" The crowd erupted in laughter, breaking the tension. Leah had a knack for turning panic into punchlines, and her humor danced in the air like confetti. She could see a few of the other prey warming up to the idea that maybe, just maybe, they could find a way out of this ridiculous situation, but the laughter was short-lived. Brad continued with his spiel, outlining the rules. The hunters would have high-tech gadgets, and the prey would need to rely on their wits. "You have until sundown tomorrow. Good luck," he concluded with a wink, and the crowd dispersed, murmurs buzzing like bees in a hive. As guests dispersed, Leah found herself at the bar, pouring a generous amount of whiskey into a glass. To survival, she toasted to herself, taking a hefty gulp. This was going to be one hell of a story, and she wasn't about to let it end without a fight. Did he just say we're the prey? A man beside her blinked in disbelief. His name tag read Mark. He had a slightly disheveled look, like someone who had just rolled out of bed and into this absurd party. "Yeah, it seems we're going to be hunted. So what's the plan, dear?" Leah quipped, raising an eyebrow. Mark cracked a smile. "I mean, if we're going to be hunted, we might as well make it interesting. Let's figure out how to outsmart these rich idiots." With a newfound camaraderie, they formed an unlikely alliance. Mark was a tech whiz, and he revealed he had a knack for hacking. "I can get us access to their security systems. Maybe we can turn the tables on them," he said, excitement lighting up his eyes. "Great. But first, let's grab a few supplies." Leah's mind raced with possibilities as they began strategizing. The night passed with more laughter than fear, but as the clock ticked toward midnight, the atmosphere shifted. The reality of their predicament loomed larger than the grandeur of the mansion. When morning came, the laughter would fade, and the hunt would begin. As the sun rose, casting eerie shadows across the estate, Leah gathered her group, 6 other guests who had decided to join her cause. They convened in a small nook of the garden, hidden by towering hedges. "All right, team," Leah said, channeling her inner motivational speaker. "We're going to treat this like an extreme game of hide-and-seek, except we really need to avoid being caught. Mark, what do you have for us?" Mark pulled out a tablet, his fingers dancing over the screen. "I've managed to tap into their security cameras. We'll know where the hunters are at all times. But we need to move quickly. they won't be hunting forever. The group nodded, fear giving way to determination. They planned their escape route, mapping out the property and identifying potential hiding spots. Leah couldn't help but feel a rush of adrenaline mixed with the surreal humor of it all. Here they were, planning their escape from a rich man's twisted fantasy, like characters in a movie gone awry. As the sun climbed higher, they scattered into the dense woods bordering the estate, laughter punctuating their fear. "Did you see that squirrel?" Leah giggled as a furry creature dashed across their path. That thing looked like it was training for the Olympics. Their banter kept spirits high, but lurking beneath the surface was the reality that they were running for their lives. They set up a few traps, using fallen branches and rocks, creating distractions for the hunters. Leah led the charge, her humor disarming her companions and fueling their resolve. Then it happened, a rustle in the underbrush. They froze, eyes wide, as a hunter strolled into view. Dressed in camouflage, he was the quintessential image of a predator, holding a high-tech crossbow and surveying the area with an arrogant smirk. Leah's heart raced. This was it, split up, she hissed, her voice barely above a whisper. "We can't let them catch us all together." In the chaos that followed, they darted in different directions. Leah found herself alone, crouched behind a tree, her breath coming in sharp gasps. She could hear the distant laughter of the hunters as they scoured the area, enjoying the thrill of the chase. But just when the fear threatened to overwhelm her, a sudden thought struck. "I can't let them have all the fun," she muttered, grinning at the absurdity of her own courage. With a deep breath, she emerged from her hiding spot, and in a stroke of inspiration, she decided to confront the hunters head-on. "Hey! Over here," she called out, waving her arms. The hunter turned, surprise etched on his face. "Come and catch me if you can." As he charged forward, Leah dashed into the trees, laughing uncontrollably at the wildness of it all. It felt liberating, this dance of life and death. But soon, the tables began to turn. Leah led the hunter deeper into the woods, using her surroundings to her advantage. She ducked and weaved, leaving him trailing behind. And just when she thought she was in the clear, she stumbled upon the remnants of an old, abandoned cabin. "This will do," she thought, pushing through the door and crouching low. The cabin was dark and musty, a perfect hiding spot. As she caught her breath, she noticed old traps lying around, remnants of the place's past. An idea sparked, maybe she could use this to her advantage. Moments later, she heard the crunch of leaves outside, and her heart raced again. The hunter was closing in. But this time, she had a plan. She quickly set up a makeshift trap using the remnants of the old cabin and hid behind a broken door. With a sudden crash, the hunter entered, oblivious to the snare she had set. "You think you can escape that easily?" he taunted, stepping forward, right into her trap. In a glorious twist of fate, he stumbled into her makeshift contraption, triggering a cascade of fallen beams that sent him sprawling. Leah couldn't help but burst out laughing, a blend of relief and exhilaration washing over her. "Not so tough now, are you?" she called out, reveling in her triumph. But as she made her way to the door, she heard more voices approaching. This was far from over. As the hunter lay entangled in her trap, Leah felt a surge of adrenaline mixed with laughter bubbling up inside her. She couldn't believe she had actually managed to outsmart one of them. But the sound of approaching voices reminded her that this was only the beginning. She took a deep breath, steadied herself, and ducked behind a rotting wooden beam, her heart racing as she strained to hear. 2 more hunters entered the cabin, their confident banter echoing off the walls. "Did you see that? She thought she could outrun us," one of them sneered. The other laughed, a cruel sound that grated on Leah's nerves. Let's find her and put an end to this little game. She's just a scared little rabbit. Leah clenched her fists, determination replacing any trace of fear. They were underestimating her, and she wasn't about to let them get away with it. She peered around her hiding spot, noting the dusty old tools scattered around the cabin, rusty nails, a heavy hammer, and an ancient saw. Inspiration struck. If she could use the environment to her advantage, she might just make it out alive. Carefully, she grabbed the hammer and crept toward a window, listening closely as the hunters continued their taunting. She's probably hiding under a rock somewhere, one of them joked, and they both burst into laughter. Taking advantage of their arrogance, Leah reached for a loose plank on the wall and pulled it away, creating a small opening. With one swift movement, she hurled the hammer out the window, sending it crashing into a nearby tree. The noise echoed through the woods, and she watched with satisfaction as both hunters turned, their heads snapping in the direction of the sound. "Did you hear that?" one of them said, eyes narrowing. "Let's check it out." They moved toward the noise, and Leah seized the moment to slip out the back door. She raced away from the cabin, the adrenaline coursing through her veins. She couldn't believe how exhilarating this was, the thrill of the hunt, except she was the one doing the hunting now. As she navigated through the trees, she couldn't shake the feeling of exhilaration mixed with the underlying tension of being hunted. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig sent her heart racing. But she kept her wits about her, focusing on the plan she and Mark had devised earlier. They had to regroup and figure out their next move. She darted deeper into the woods, breathing heavily but unable to suppress a grin. The other prey might still be out there, and she hoped they were managing to hold their own. After what felt like an eternity of dodging trees and weaving through the underbrush, she spotted a clearing up ahead. Peeking through the foliage, she saw Mark standing there with a few other members of their group. They were all visibly shaken but unharmed, and Leah's heart swelled with relief. "Hey! Over here," she called, waving her arms wildly. Mark looked up, his face lighting up with a mix of joy and surprise. "Leah! You made it!" He rushed toward her, pulling her into a tight embrace. "We were worried. We saw some of the hunters heading this way." "Yeah, I had a close call, but I got one of them caught in a trap," she said, grinning like she had just won a gold medal. "We need to figure out what to do next. Did you find anything useful?" Mark nodded eagerly, gesturing for the others to gather around. "I managed to hack into their main system briefly before the connection dropped. I found out there are only a few hunters left, but they're armed with some serious gear. We need to be strategic." Leah glanced around at her group, who all looked ready for action. "All right, then. We can't just wait around to get picked off one by one. Let's set some traps of our own and use the hunters' arrogance against them." The group began to buzz with energy, ideas bouncing back and forth. Leah suggested using the cabin as a base, where they could prepare their defenses. They moved quickly, setting up makeshift barriers and camouflaging themselves with branches and leaves, just like kids playing army in the backyard. As the sun began to dip low in the sky, casting long shadows through the trees, they took their positions, hiding and waiting. The hunters would be back, and they were ready to fight back. Hours passed, and the anticipation was palpable. Leah found herself whispering jokes to Mark to keep spirits high. "I feel like we're in one of those horror movies where the teenagers are always making stupid decisions. You know, the ones who hear a noise and decide to investigate." Mark chuckled softly. "Just as long as we don't split up, we should be fine." Just as the darkness settled in, they heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps approaching. "They're here," Mark whispered, eyes wide with excitement. Leah's heart raced. "Remember the plan. Let them come to us." The hunters entered the clearing, their flashlights bobbing like fireflies. "This is getting boring," one of them complained. "Where are those losers hiding?" Leah exchanged glances with her group, and they stifled giggles, adrenaline fueling their nerves. As the hunters moved closer, Leah whispered, "Now." They sprang into action, launching their traps and using the element of surprise to their advantage. Leah had rigged a net trap, and as one of the hunters stumbled into it, they let out a startled yell, flailing as he was ensnared. The others shouted in confusion, and Leah couldn't help but laugh at the sight. "Looks like the rabbit's got some teeth," she called out, her voice ringing with delight. The others joined in, their confidence surging as they watched their plan unfold. As the chaos ensued, one of the hunters turned and charged toward Leah, but she was ready. Remembering the heavy hammer she had used earlier, she grabbed a nearby branch and swung it with all her might, catching him off guard. He stumbled back, falling into the makeshift barriers they had set up, crashing to the ground. "Who's the prey now?" she shouted, adrenaline and laughter mixing into a heady cocktail. The others cheered, their spirits high as they realized they were gaining the upper hand. But just as they began to believe they could win this bizarre game, they heard a loud crack followed by an ominous silence. The remaining hunters, now aware of the trap they'd walked into, regrouped. "Let's retreat and regroup," one shouted. "They're actually fighting back." As they retreated, Leah's heart sank for a moment. "They're running away," she muttered incredulously. "Did we actually scare them off?" Mark laughed, shaking his head. "Looks like we've turned the tables. But let's not get complacent. They'll be back with reinforcements." The group exchanged excited looks, a sense of victory washing over them. They were no longer mere prey, they had fought back and made their mark. But they needed to prepare for the hunters' return. They set to work, fortifying their position and gathering any tools they could find in the woods. Leah took charge, organizing the group into different tasks while keeping the atmosphere light. "If we're going to survive this, we might as well have fun, right? We can tell our friends we spent a weekend in the human hunting grounds, the best vacation ever." Laughter echoed in the darkness, and for a moment, the reality of their situation faded away. They shared stories, making light of their circumstances, which helped ease the tension. As the night wore on, they stayed vigilant, taking turns watching the perimeter. Leah couldn't shake the feeling that this was a turning point. They were no longer just trying to escape, they were fighting for their lives, and they were doing it together. Hours passed, and just as dawn began to break, the atmosphere shifted again. The sound of engines revving pierced the quiet of the morning, followed by the low hum of drones flying overhead. Leah's heart sank. The hunters had returned, this time with reinforcements. "They must have called for backup," Mark said, his voice low. "We need to get ready." Leah nodded, her pulse quickening. "Everyone, take your positions. Remember what we practiced." The group scattered into the trees, hearts pounding as they readied themselves for what was to come. The hunters began to spread out, searching for signs of their prey. Leah took a deep breath, calming her racing heart. She would not let fear take over. She had led them this far, and she was determined to see it through. Just then, she spotted a familiar figure among the hunters, Brad, the host. His confident stride made her stomach churn. "Looks like our friendly host has come to join the party," she muttered, gritting her teeth. "Time to show him what we're made of." As the hunters drew nearer, Leah caught Mark's eye. "On my signal," she whispered, raising her hand, ready to give the command. The first hunter stepped too close, and with a swift movement, Leah called out, "Now!" The group sprang into action, launching their traps and employing their improvised weapons. Chaos erupted. Leah and her team fought back, using their surroundings to their advantage. She ducked and dodged, her movements fueled by determination and the thrill of the fight. They scattered, drawing the hunters into their carefully laid traps. Brad's voice boomed above the fray, ordering his hunters to regroup. "Don't let them escape. They think they can turn the tables on us." Leah's heart raced. She had never felt more alive. "We can do this," she shouted, rallying her group. "They're just a bunch of overconfident fools." With renewed vigor, they pushed forward, using every ounce of creativity and resourcefulness they had. One by one, they managed to ensnare the hunters, turning the tide of the battle. The woods echoed with laughter and shouts, the absurdity of the situation amplifying their resolve. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the remaining hunters began to retreat. Brad, now visibly frustrated, shouted orders, but the confidence in his voice was wavering. Leah and her group had fought back fiercely, and they were winning. As the last of the hunters fled, Leah couldn't help but laugh, the sound echoing in the trees. "We did it. We actually did it." Her group erupted into cheers, celebrating their hard-fought victory. It was surreal. The once hunted had become the hunters, and they had triumphed against the odds, but just as they began to let their guard down, a chilling sound cut through the air, the roar of engines approaching fast. Leah's heart dropped. "We're not done yet, are we?" Mark grimaced, scanning the horizon. "I think they've brought in more than just backup." Leah's mind raced. They couldn't let their victory slip away now. "We need to regroup. We've proven we can hold our own, but this might be the real test." As the sounds of the vehicles grew closer, they hurried back to the cover of the trees, hearts pounding with a mix of excitement and dread. Leah knew they couldn't give up now. They had come too far to back down. The hunters would soon realize their numbers had dwindled, and they would be back, angrier and more determined than ever. Gathering the group, Leah took a deep breath, looking each of them in the eyes. "All right, listen up. We've shown we can outsmart them once. Now, we need to be smarter and faster. We need to outwit them for real. If they want a game, we'll give them a game they won't forget." They nodded, fear mingling with resolve. They weren't just playing a game anymore, they were fighting for their freedom. As the sounds of the approaching vehicles echoed in the distance, Leah felt a fierce determination rise within her. They would make their stand here, and they would not go quietly. Together, they could take on anything, even a horde of arrogant hunters who thought they held all the cards. With newfound purpose, they prepared for the next round, ready to turn the tables once again. Leah couldn't help but smile, even as her heart raced with anticipation. This was their moment, and she intended to seize it with everything she had. As the vehicles rolled into view, she readied herself for the challenge ahead. Whatever happened next, they would face it together, as a team. The stakes were high, but they were more than just prey now. They were a force to be reckoned with, and with that thought echoing in her mind, Leah charged into the fray, ready to fight for her freedom, her laughter mingling with the adrenaline that coursed through her veins. The battle was far from over.